Jedi Survivor is finally out, and I've been playing non-stop since getting it, and with it, I have some tips to get you started in your early hours playing the game. These are things I wish I knew when starting out, and it will hopefully give you guys an easier time as you save the galaxy with Cal, or at the very least, make it so you don't waste any time. I won't be bringing up any story spoilers, but there will be some minor gameplay spoilers. But trust me, you'll want to know these things. But anything major, I will avoid showing. With that being said, let's jump right into it.
Rise, Jedi Knight.
Remember, trust only in the Force.
The first thing you need to know is that exploration plays a huge part in Jedi Survivor. That's no surprise, but if you've ever played a Metroidvania, you kind of have an idea how this will go. The huge maps are all interconnected, but in order to open up new areas, you have to have specific abilities. These abilities can only be unlocked through story progression. So while I encourage exploring if there's an area you can't quite figure out how to get past or a puzzle that's locking you out of a certain path, don't worry about it just yet. You'll be able to come back when you have the right abilities. Don't worry about wasting time trying to cheese it or look up online how to get past locked doors. The game will give you all the tools you need, just not right out the gate. Because of this and more, I highly recommend focusing on the story first and then come back and do your exploration later. Or at the very least, do what you can. Don't sweat the hard stuff. I realize this isn't really a tip. Yes, it's just me saying play the game, but you know, video games. Also, don't forget to dive underwater where you can because there's plenty of chests hidden down there too. You have two ways to upgrade Cal. First is skill points. These are earned in all the ways you would expect. Story progression, side missions, defeating enemies, you know, video games. But the important thing to know is that these skill points are not limited. You can keep farming them long after the game is over and unlock everything, but it will probably take you some time. If you want to respec your skill points, you do get one free respec, but after that, each respec costs you one skill point, so don't be afraid to mess up at first. Early on, I recommend focusing on the Survivor and Force skill trees. You may not know which stance you want to ultimately go with, but in the meantime, the Survivor and Force trees will give you significant boosts in things that are much more general, that you're going to use no matter what stance you use, so maybe focus on those skills a bit first and then specialize later. The second way to upgrade Cal is perks. These are pretty few and far between in the early game, you won't see many of them, but they become more important as you progress. Once you have Z set up shop, you can buy perks and perk slots from them. Speaking of, you'll come across a number of different NPCs in your travels, many of whom can be recruited and join your community at Rambler's Reach, restore the rundown homes, and open up specialized shops. Some even let you play minigames like Hollow Chest from the movies. One puzzle a lot of people may have trouble with are these walls that can be clearly blown up, and the solution isn't always nearby. These rolling droids will spawn and chase after you, blowing up if they catch you, so just have them chase you without getting too close and then push them into the wall. Voila. The security droids are one of the most difficult enemies to face in the game, and usually the ability for BD1 to hack them to fight for you instead of against you isn't unlocked till late in the game. But there's a trick for getting this early to make all your fights that much easier. On Kobo, you'll find this green shield with two stormtroopers behind it. Normally you can't get past these, but approach the stormtroopers and you can Jedi mind trick them into opening the first door.
I already showed you my authorization.
You already showed me your authorization.
The final door is still in your way, but there's a terminal right there for you to learn how to hack the security droids. By far, the most important thing you can collect in this game is BD1 skins. Second is health stims. The more stims you have, the longer you can keep fighting, and especially with bosses, this is extremely important. Like Fallen Order, these stims can be found while exploring the world, but there's also a few you can get pretty easily. You of course also get some by progressing the story, but you can also get one really early on by buying it from Doma. That might not be too obvious. Priorite shards are pretty easy to get, and you'll use them to buy new cosmetics, like haircuts. But don't waste your money just yet. First thing you need to do is save up 10 of them, and then buy the mysterious key code from Doma. This will unlock the back room, not those back rooms, don't worry, where you can get yourself an easy health stim upgrade. And a good way to get Priorite shards is these fast little guys called scavenger bots. They'll bolt away the moment you get too close or run too fast, so the best way to get these guys is to to slowly walk up on them and then throw your lightsaber. You just gotta sneak on them. Like Fallen Order, there are legendary bosses scattered across the worlds that you can take on, and let me tell you, some of these guys are really hard. In fact, like some of those locked doors and blocked off paths I mentioned earlier, many of these bosses are meant to be taken on at a later point. So don't feel too bad or waste time banging your head against the wall. These guys will be much more manageable once you get further in the game. Unless you want the challenge, in which I respect it, but you gotta ask yourself, is it worth the time trying to beat the boss on hard mode when you want to complete the story instead? Just ask yourself that. Is this worth possibly getting spoiled? If the answer is no, move on. One boss I highly recommend staying away from is the spawn of Ugdo. That giant annoying frog from the first game, in the first area. You know what I mean, the first boss guy. We all thought, I beat him before, I can beat him again. Just don't. There's an enticing pyrite shard just sitting on top of a trapdoor, but if you fall for it, this guy is waiting for you and he's extremely difficult. He's not worth it, my friends. And speaking of difficulty, the hardest encounters are the ones where you are surrounded by multiple enemies. You can get swarmed if you're not too careful, and you can only block so many blaster bolts. Just look at all the shots of Order 66 and you'll know that no Jedi can last forever. To help with this, the best ability is Confusion. You can use this force ability to temporarily get an enemy to fight on your side. Upgrades to this will let you do to more enemies at once and have them confused for longer. But having even one enemy distracting the others while you whittle down their numbers is invaluable. Any guns you can take out of a gunfight and put towards the enemies is worth it. And speaking of that strategy, the blaster stance is completely OP in my opinion. You won't unlock this till later in the game, but with it, Cal gets to wield an uncivilized blaster, and his lightsaber skills start looking like fencing. Think Count Dooku, but with a blaster. Using the blaster, you can pick off weak enemies from a distance, making the numbers game tilt in your favor. But more importantly, you can keep enemies from recovering their stagger gauge. All enemies have a stagger gauge you'll have to break down before you can finally strike. But if you go too long without hitting them, they'll recover. In order to stop this, blast them a couple times from afar while dealing with another enemy just to make sure you can take them down once you're able to focus to them. While I was exploring the world in Fallen Order, I always had trouble navigating the map, and while Jedi Survivor does have some improvements, it's still pretty difficult navigating the world. You can have BD1 set waypoints, but it's still difficult for me to translate the 3D map into the game world. Maybe it's just me. If you have any luck with it, fantastic. The biggest help I found is finding out what you can and can't access. If the icon is green or yellow, you're good to go. If it's red, you know that you'll need to come back at a later point, when you have the right ability or tool. Either way, if you weren't a fan of the map in the first game, you're probably not going to be a fan of this one either. And finally, the most important thing, you can, drumroll please, pet the animals. I love it. I'm so happy. I always want to pet the space doggos, and here they are. There's still a lot in Jedi Survivor I'm still going through, but these are the things that would have saved me a ton of time if I'd known them starting out, and I want to pass them along to you. If you liked this video, be sure to give us a like and comment down below any tips that you have to help any new Jedi starting out their adventures with Cal and BD1.